Did you know the best seeds for your garden don't come from the nursery? In fact, the seeds that will create the most robust and delicious fruits and vegetables come directly from your garden. This is because they are uniquely adapted to your growing conditions, better than anything you can buy from a fancy catalog or website. Through the magic of seed saving, it is quite possible to have the garden of your dreams. The best part is, saving your own seeds is surprisingly easy and fun. With a bit of instruction, anyone can become a seed-saving superstar. Let us teach you how in our free seed-saving webinar. Just text SEEDS to 33444 to sign up, or visit seedsavinghacked.org for more information. That's SEEDS to 33444, or visit seedsavinghacked.org.
You're listening to the Urban Farm Podcast, your partner in the grow your own food revolution. Whether you've just been introduced to urban farming or you're a lifelong advocate, we're sure you'll leave feeling more informed, equipped, and empowered to dig deeper into the soil of your local food economy. With you every step of the way, here's your host, Greg Peterson.
Today on the Urban Farm Podcast, we have Colin Austin to talk about the invention of wicking beds and biologically intense vegetables. Many years ago, at the birth of the computer revolution, Colin learned to write code, and he set up a company which grew to become Australia's leading exporter of technical software. Then, 20 years ago, Colin developed a growing system, which is known today as Wicking Bed Technology, and has gone viral worldwide. He runs a website, waterright.com.au, and a newsletter, which are leading sources of information on wicking bed growing technology around the globe. Colin's wife was very healthy, and after moving to Australia from China, she developed diabetes when she transitioned to a Western-style diet. Consequently, he has spent many years studying the causes and remedies for diabetes. This complex disease involves many factors such as genetics and lifestyle stress, but the dominating one, of course, is diet. As a result of this research, he is developing a new farming technology for growing in nutrient-dense soil, which is very biologically diverse. He says living soils are based on recycling waste and are regenerative. He believes we have been destroying our soil and that we are now approaching what he calls peak soil. Welcome to the show today, Colin.
I'm pleased to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. It's actually, I'm quite excited to talk with you today, being that you are the person that developed wicking bed technology, and we'll get to that. So I shared a bit about you. Can you fill in the blanks for us and share more about the path you took to get where you're at now?
Well, it's a long story, but basically I'm an engineer, and I came through. In fact, I was a university lecturer, and I first saw computers, and I thought that this is going to totally revolutionize engineering design.
Yep.
So I set up a company which is basically involved with fluid flow, and it was just like being on the tail of a tiger. It just grew and grew and grew. It became one of the largest exporters of technical software from Australia, and was eventually purchased by one of the American software giants for the best part of $500 million.
Wow.
Which meant that I could do whatever I wanted to in life. Now,
yeah.
I've always been very passionate about the environment, and so I said, well, how can I use my expertise? And so I became very interested in water, how water was used all the way around the world. So I toured around the world, looking at all the research institutes, and I picked up two technologies which I thought were very important. One was subsurface irrigation, and the other one was irrigation scheduling, because there's what I call the irrigator's dilemma.
Right.
In that if an irrigator puts on too small amount of water, it just hits the surface,
right.
and then evaporates, so it never gets to the root of the plants, and it's really a very inefficient way of watering. If you put on too much water, then the water just goes past the root zone, so you're wasting water. You're also flushing all the nutrients
out.
Past the root zone, which in a country like Australia has immense environmental problems. I guess you've heard of our little tourist attraction called the Great Barrier Reef.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, we've in fact been steadily destroying our barrier reef by pushing too much nutrients in the direction. And there's a major issue here to stop all that nutrient runoff.
So how do you fix the irrigator's dilemma?
Well, my first attempt, which was very much an entrepreneur's technical approach, was to develop a piece of software which actually learnt the irrigation characteristics of the soil. So you apply a certain amount of water, and then you have to have sensors to measure where the water is.
Right.
So you use soil moisture sensors to work out how deep the soil is, deep the water has penetrated into the soil. So that gives you like a starting point. Then you use that to almost like guess how much water to put on the next time, and you measure all the evaporation. So you know how much the water the plant's using. So you make a prediction of how much water you should put on. Next time you get it better, and then you do that 3 or 4 times. And by the time you've done it 3 or 4 iterations, this self-learning software enables you to apply just the right amount of water for it to reach the root zone. That's the good news. The bad news it was really quite an incredibly complex piece of software. This was a long time, and of course this was in an era when software was not as well accepted as what it was now. So it didn't really hit the jackpot like I was hoping. But another event occurred in my life in that I was asked by World Vision to go out to Ethiopia. They're aware of my interest in irrigation and water. This was right in the middle of a drought. People were just dying of starvation because they just couldn't grow the crops. So they invited me to go out to Ethiopia to see if I could come up with any solutions. And when I looked at what the problem was, it wasn't in fact a lack of rain. It was the variability of the rainfall. And you might start off with a good rainfall in the spring, the plants will grow good, but if luck was against you and you just happened to miss rainfall in those 2 or 3 weeks when the seed heads are supposed to be filling out, then they just don't fill out, the plants die, and 6 months later people are starving.
Yeah.
So I said that the real problem here is to find a cheap way of storing water. Now, there's an issue here. There's various constraints on your design. The biggest of these is that the wealthy people are earning about $2 a day. So you can just forget all monster, irrigation dams and pumps and all this sort of thing. It has to be something that is very simple and crude and was within the reach of a peasant farmer.
Right.
So I came up with this incredibly simple idea, which is really just to dig a trench, line it with a piece of plastic to make it like a waterproof layer. Then, of course, the other problem they have is nutrients. So I got them to collect up all the weeds, because weeds, in fact, are incredibly efficient at extracting nutrients from the soil, much better than food plants.
Yes,
People think that weeds are bad, but they're your basic nutrient source.
Yep.
They can so go up, collect up all your weeds, put them in the bottom of the of what is now called a wicking bed. That wasn't called a wicking bed at that time. This provides a nutrient layer. It also creates a sponge that can absorb a lot of water, and then you put the soil back on top, so it's just raised above the ground. And I also had some wings with these things to divert any rainfall that came to fill up the reservoir,
right,
making maximum use of the water. And this gave you a way that you could maintain a reasonable quantity of water. I can't compete with a Dirty Great Dam, but you could store a certain amount of water to ease out the fluctuations in the rainfall. And this was really a very simple, cost-effective technology.
Wow.
So when I came back to Australia, I put it up on my website just out of curiosity. And it was one of those things where things just go viral. It was picked up, and now wherever I go, I go around the world and give lectures and talk about wicking beds. And like I was in Wuhan in China, and there's people from all over, from Russia, from Africa, from Nepal. They all knew about wicking beds. It's one of the amazing things in life,
Yeah. Love it. Gotta love the internet sometimes. So give me an idea of when that happened. When did you go to Africa? And
we're talking about 20 years ago.
Wow. So over the past 20 years, this whole notion of wicking beds has gone viral, and people are using it all over the world. I'll bet you get a lot of emails from people about this.
Well, there's good things and bad things about the internet. One of the good things is it gives people access to an immense amount of information.
Right.
There's also a great problem that often that information can become corrupted.
Oh, yes.
And this is very definitely what's happened with the wicking beds. And in fact, there's a little story about this, but
please.
I had a pipe. at the base of the wicking bed to fill them up. This is in Western society where you have access to water. So I put a pipe in the base of the bed, and this was an Aggie pipe. I don't know what you call them in the US, but like a drainage pipe with all sorts with myriads of little slots in.
Yes. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and of course it just gets filled up with the soil. So what I did, I put a piece of cloth over that pipe, simply to stop it being jammed up by all the dirt. This was in fact picked up by a certain person, and they completely got it wrong, because instead of having the idea that the cloth went over the pipe, they put it over the base level, which was in fact my organic material.
Right.
So now, and they were in fact a much better publicist than me. You know, I'm an engineer, I'm not a salesperson. They were much better at making videos and making things more entertaining than me. And now the standard method of making a video, of making a wicking bed, you know, is to have stones, which are not water absorbent and they don't wick.
Right.
Put a layer of cloth on top, and then put the soil on top of that. And it's totally wrong technology.
Yeah.
One of the frustrations of my life.
Yeah. You know, I have to tell you, when I first saw the wicking bed technology and I saw that design, it's like, hold on. How can that work? It can't work.
Well, in actual fact, I did quite a bit of research to find out how it does work. You know, water is an incredibly complex entity.
Yeah.
And there's many ways in which water moves through the soil. I won't give you a lecture on how water moves through the soil, but there's one particular method, which is evaporation and condensation.
Right.
So if you have a water level, the water will evaporate, and you'll have saturated air. Well, air saturated with water vapor,
right,
in the cavity. That will condense onto any surface. If that's a hydroscopic surface, if it absorbs water, then the water will be absorbed on the layer of soil above, and then it will start to wick. So in fact, it's an evaporation condensation process. So in fact, it does work. I mean, if it didn't work, people wouldn't do it. But absolutely, it's not wicking, and it's a relatively inefficient way of
got it.
Of transporting water.
Yeah.
The whole trick about making wicking beds is to get the soil right.
Right.
If you get soil, should have a very high airspace, a very high volume, this volume in fact comes from the creatures in the soil. You know, the worms and all the microbiology in the soil.
Yeah.
So these go through and they'll make the soil into a mass of little pores, which then gives you a very large volume to hold water.
Right.
I've in fact, one of the little tests I do, and it's a test that anybody can do. They just take a sample of their soil, they put it into a beaker, they weigh it, then they fill it with water again, and then reweigh it, and that immediately tells you what the void content of the soil is. And if you've got a good soil, it should be at least 50% voids, or maybe even more. If you've got a high organic content in the soil, and I use organic material basically as a fertilizer.
Right.
And also to feed the biology, to create the pore space in the soil, then you end up with a soil which can have 70-80% void space. And if you put something like vermiculite in it, then you can get up to in the 80s and 90% void space. Now, the big advantage of this is if you don't have a cloth above, so the roots can go right the way down into this highly nutritious base. And when the roots get to this highly nutritious base, they will suck out all the water. So the water is continually moving, and they're also picking up all these nutrients. And doing it that way, you never have to worry about the problems that happen so often in wicking beds of the water turning putrid.
Right. Interesting. Cool. So, wow. So you had a software company that did epically. Now you've created this wicking bed technology 20 years ago, and it's gone viral. And your wife comes down with diabetes after starting to eat a Western-style diet. What did you do about that?
Well, my wife's Chinese. When she came to Australia, she developed diabetes within a couple of years.
Wow.
And that was very clearly a diet-related thing. Diabetes is all about diet.
Yeah.
The medical profession can soften the impact of diabetes by controlling your blood sugar levels. But controlling the blood sugar level, that's a symptom of diabetes rather than the cause. If you're going to resolve diabetes, you have to get back to the real issue, which is insulin resistance.
Right.
Insulin resistance comes from diet. So you have to change your diet if you're going to reverse diabetes. You can manage it, but you can't reverse it by the pills. You've got to use diet to reverse diabetes. I started off a massive research project to try and understand the relationships between diet and our health and how our bodies work. This is a fun area. There is so much there is so much controversy. It almost boils down to like a religious cult.
Right.
You get these people who are, I'm not being derogatory to them. They've got evidence for it. But what they're saying is that if you eat too much fat, this is going to be wrong. So you've got to have a completely or virtually fat-free diet. You get another school says that this is absolutely wrong. That if you eat too much, if you cut out all your fat, you're going to end up by eating carbohydrates. If you eat carbohydrates, the body just turns them into sugar, which makes it worse. To get rid of the sugar, your body produces insulin, and you essentially become addictive to insulin. Right. And you lose your insulin sensitivities. So they say this diet is in fact making you worse. What you've got to do is cut down on the output of your insulin. You've got to reduce the insulin in your bloodstream. Right. And then there's a third school of thought that says, look, what you need to do is have a lot of fiber in your diet. The fiber helps slow down the absorption of nutrients of your food. Right. So you avoid all these sugar spikes, and because if you get a sugar spike, you're going to get an insulin spike. Right. I'm talking about type 2 diabetes here. Type 1's totally different. I looked at all this stuff and I said, well, who do I believe?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And, I just written a nice little article about people who designed an airplane, but they forgot to put a rudder on it. I use this as an analogy for our body. We're doing all this work trying to study the mechanics, but we're not looking at the control. And our control comes from our gut biology. Yeah. Now, if there's one area of medical research which is really exciting, in fact, I reckon it's the most exciting area of research in any area of technology, and that's the gut biology. Right. Because people are really beginning to understand that the gut biology really controls your whole body. We produce a mass of hormones which control our cranium brain. We talk about the gut brain and the cranium brain. These are totally interlinked, both by the vagus nerve, which directly links them, and also by these hormones that we produce. Now, we've identified, every time I read a new article, I come across a new hormone. And I wouldn't mind betting there's a whole bunch of hormones we don't even know exist. But you have this incredibly complicated system which really monitors our body. And you're not going to cure diabetes or any of the other communicable, non-communicable diseases, like heart attacks and strokes, unless you really sort out your gut biology. So my interest has been how to change gut biology. Now, I've done all sorts of experiments with some of the commercial probiotics that are supposed to change your gut biology, and really I've been very disappointed with the results. So I came back to the old conclusion: you really have to change your diet, and you've got to start eating food on a regular basis, which is going to change your gut biology. So my latest series of experiments has really been to grow vegetables which have a very high biological content. Wow. Essentially, the system I developed up is just a natural extension of the wicking bed, to be honest. Right. Except instead of having one or two chambers, it really has three chambers. I've got an external water chamber. I've got the area where I'm actually growing the vegetables, and I've got another area where I'm actually decomposing materials. So I'm actually feeding the biology. Growing biology is like a farmer. You've got to have your inoculant in the first place, and then you've got to feed it, you've got to water it, and you've got to give it the right conditions. And then bacteria just breed like, I'm going to say they breed like rabbits, but they breed much faster than rabbits. Exactly. Exactly. It's about a 20-minute cycle rather than a 2-week cycle. Wow. So you get this fantastic reproduction of the beneficial biology. So that was that's the basic technology I've been experimenting with this last period. Yeah. But there's always a snag. Every time, of course, technology is always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And the problem with this enriched biological vegetables is, of course, that biology is unstable. So if you go and try and store your vegetables, then you're going to lose a lot of the biology.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, this is what happens commercially. Like you go and buy vegetables from the supermarket. I mean, they look fantastic. They're beautiful and they're clean. There's no caterpillars or weird and wonderful creatures on them.
Right.
And they go through a very intensive process. I mean, they usually, I don't know how about the US, but in Australia, the big supermarkets, they'll acid wash the vegetables 3 times.
Yeah.
And they'll kill off the bacteria that's on the surface of the vegetables. And they do this. This extends the shelf life. If you've got bacteria on your vegetables, it will start to degrade, almost immediately. So you may get 2 or 3 days out of the vegetable. If you clean them and kill off all the bacteria, then you can extend that to almost weeks rather than days.
Right.
Although really your biggest benefit in the first few minutes. Anybody who's picked a pea from a pod and eaten it straight away without having any delay will realize it's a totally different tasting beast to what you eat if you buy commercial peas.
Right, exactly.
So this gave me a little issue of how can I extend the shelf life without killing off the biology.
Right.
And in fact, there's very well-established technology which has been used for years and has probably kept diabetes at bay historically, and that's fermented vegetables. Because when you ferment the vegetables, you are in fact allowing the bacteria. It's not just bacteria. There's a whole range of biology there. It enables these to be enhanced. If you have fermented vegetables, they keep for a long time, so you solve this shelf life problem. But you've also probably increased the biology to make it much more effective at changing your gut bacteria.
Right.
So it's my current area of research. I guess I do have one little thing that if you look at conventional fermented vegetables, of which the common one would be sauerkraut.
Right.
At least in the West. If you go to Korea, they have kimchi, but you have to have a special stomach to absorb that because it's so bloody hot.
Right. Exactly.
But sauerkraut is what we think of as fermented vegetables, and this really isn't very appetizing sort of thing. People aren't going to start eating sauerkraut by the millions of tons. So what I'm experimenting with now is how can we have a whole range of vegetables in this to make it taster, and even adding fruit to the to the thing, so it comes out with a pleasant taste that people want to eat. Now this is all experimental stuff, so I shouldn't be talking to you about it. But you asked me the question, so I've always had a big mouth.
Well, there you go. Well, you're doing great here today, and it's great information. So you're taking, basically, if I hear you correctly, what you're doing is you're taking these biologically active vegetables that you have grown in biologically active soil, and you're harvesting them and using them to ferment basically as soon as they come off of the plants.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm using a 2-stage fermentation process. I put them into containers, which in fact have access to a bit of access to the air. Right. I let them ferment for 2 or 3 days, and then I put them into sealed containers. But this isn't new technology. The Chinese have been doing this for probably 2,000 years.
Right, or longer.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you're growing the plants, which is basically biologically active water, right?
Well, there's biology in the water. There's also the biology in the soil. Yes, it's a biologically active matrix, shall we say?
Perfect. Now, that comes on the plants. Do the plants actually uptake it inside of the plants?
That is something we need a lot more research. They certainly seem to be on the surface of the vegetables. What actually is happening inside the vegetables, and of course it all depends what it is. I mean, I'm growing root vegetables. Things like beetroots and radishes and things like this. And then of course we've got things like onions. What the biology inside is another issue. Yeah. And I just don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. That would be a curious thing to find out.
Look, the trouble with doing research is the more research you do, the more questions you find.
Of course.
That need answering.
Yeah.
Look, as I say, like I stumbled upon computers in the days of punch cards.
Yep.
There was no idea where it was going to develop. But, my life has been involved with technology and predicting what's going to happen. And I can just see that in the area of gut biology, we're in exactly the same position as we were with computers with punch cards.
Right.
And in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, our understanding of gut biology will be much greater, and our health will be commensurately improved.
Yeah.
We're on a downward slide now with our health.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
We've managed to overcome most of the infectious diseases, but we substituted those with these non-communicable diseases in which we're damaging our body by the food we eat.
Right.
So this is obviously, when you're looking at public health, I mean, diabetes, the cost of diabetes is in the trillions of dollars on a worldwide basis.
Oh, yeah.
And it's getting worse. I mean, obesity is a massive problem. Obesity leads to diabetes.
Right.
And so this is obviously going to be a major area of research over the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Well, I just want to thank you for this great work that you've done with the wicking beds, and now this new work you're doing to help with diabetes and really improving your gut health, because it's my understanding if we improve our gut health, it really improves our overall health exponentially. Is that the case?
Absolutely. There's no issue about this. I'd almost put it stronger than this. Improving your gut health is the first thing you have to work on. It's no good trying just to play around with your nutrient content, the fats or the carbohydrates. You have to get your gut biology work, so you want to eat the right sort of food. This is what controls your body. The food you eat is just the fuel, and you need the gut biology to control your food.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Cool. So in your research, as you've processed through this and you're doing the work that you're doing, what is one of the curious things that you have found about this? What one thing did you look at and it kind of had you sit back and go, that's interesting?
Well, it's probably nothing to do directly with the gut biology, but it's very much to do with diet. In that there's a psychological factor here. I mean, when I was in Ethiopia with World Vision, I was working with another guy, and he'd spend a lot of time looking at native plants from Australia, which provided food for the desert dwellers. Right. And he thought that these do a fantastic job in Ethiopia. He took them out there, and the Ethiopians just would not eat this strange food.
Right.
And this is exactly what I see here in the Western society. People know that these foods are bad, but they still eat them, and they know that foods are good, and they refuse to eat them because they haven't. Their psychology prevents them changing their diet. I think one of the fascinating and most important problem is, what steps do you have to take to help people change their diet and adopt a food that they've probably never tasted before.
Right.
I don't like tomatoes. I know why I don't like tomatoes. When I was a kid, my parents used to grow tomatoes, and of course I was brought up in the war. Food was short, so I had to eat these, almost like rotten tomatoes, and they have a rotten tomato has a horrible taste.
Oh my God! Yes.
That still sticks in my brain, and I'm an old man now. I'm 77, and this goes right back to my kids. But I've still never really been able to be comfortable about eating tomatoes. I force myself to eat them, and when I find they're okay, I'm okay. But I still have that resilience, that thought impregnated in my brain. Hey, tomatoes can taste yucky.
Exactly.
How do you get rid of it?
Yeah.
And this is it's not just a joke. It's a major problem if we're going to change people's diet.
Right. Wow. All right. Well, cool. Thank you so much for that great information. And at this point, I want to shift on you, and I'd like for you to talk about a time you failed, how you overcame that failure, and what you might have learned from it.
Yes. Well, this is a $64,000 question.
Yeah.
My whole life has been involved in innovation. If I was to put down on my curriculum vitae, if I ever went to a job again, it would be I'm an innovator. I'm always looking, fascinated by new technology. Now, if you're involved with new technology, you can almost guarantee that 99% of the time it will fail. So part of being an innovator is the ability to, if you like, psychologically accept that things will fail. In fact, in research, I have what I call the zigzag approach. In that you start off on a particular route, and you do your research, and it fails. But when you do that research, that's going to give you another idea, which is going to zap you off in a totally different direction.
Yeah.
And then that's going to fail, and that's going to zap you off in another direction. Now, I call this Zig Zag Research. Now, of course, this is absolutely the opposite of what public funding of research is.
Right.
You do research, you put all your information down, you put your application in, and you have to go through all these steps. If you went to your research funder and says, look, I've got a great idea, I want to cancel what I'm doing and go off on this, you'll never get another grant.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because they like this systematic approach. If you're in the business of innovation, you have to accept failure and throw it away and zap off in some other direction.
Yeah.
And it's a psychological attitude towards technology and how new ideas come.
Yeah.
So I would not advise anybody about how to innovate. It's just accept failure as part of life.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful. What do you consider your biggest success?
I mean, that's a difficult question. Obviously, my original technology, because I pioneered a new technology with fluid flow, that was obviously and commercially very successful.
Right.
I think in terms of popular demand, the Wicking Bed has certainly been very successful. In terms of reaching the market, it's been very successful. I just feel a little bit sad that the technology, if you like, has got corrupted, so people aren't getting the benefits out of the technology that they should. So that's something that is sad for me. But hey, it's basically me that initiated it. I won't say I invented the Wicking Beds, because Wicking Beds have been around for thousands of years.
Right.
I mean, they are natural. You go out to any desert, and you'll see a clay pan. On top of the clay pan, there's a layer of sand. That gets filled with the sand gets filled with water, and that's a natural wicking bed.
Yeah.
That's the original concept behind the wicking bed. So I won't say I developed the wicking bed. I won't say I invented the wicking bed. I certainly developed it up into a formal method of growing.
Yeah.
And I certainly instrumental in getting its popularity. As I say, it got the technology got a bit corrupted. Yeah. I think the work I'm doing now on diabetes and all non-communicable diseases like heart attacks, strokes, I think this could have much more profound impact, because it is such a horrendous problem.
Oh yeah.
And it's work in progress, Yeah. I guess one of the things that worries me about life, I'm 77 years old. I'm not going to see the end of this. I'm going to die before it's before the work is finished. So the question is, how do I pass this on to the next generation of younger people?
Yeah.
So they pick up. It's like a relay race,
Yeah, exactly.
I've got to hand the baton on.
So what drives you? Why do you do what you do?
Look, I mean, that would mean getting involved in the psychology. I was brought up in the war, and there was two things that were very obvious in the war. One was that was the food situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was born in England and I migrated to Australia, but food was, the Germans tried to starve England into submission.
Yeah.
So food was absolutely critical. So I've got a bit of a fetish, if you like, about food. I think the other thing, I was a young kid in that era. And of course, the bombing was on such a massive scale. They started building new estates and new towns, which weren't a great social success, to be honest. But, you imagine a young kid. All my playgrounds are being taken up by building sites.
Right.
This has made me very, very sensitive to the damage that mankind is doing to the environment. So certainly not a fanatical greenie. But hey, I've got a lot of green tinge in my blood, I have to tell you that. All the work I'm doing, with water and soil and nutrients and the trace minerals, which are another issue we haven't even talked about.
Right.
Very, very important. Mankind has to learn how to manage the earth on which we live, and this is something which is deeply ingrained in my thinking.
Yeah. So I'm all about education, and I have to know, is there a book that has been influential for you in this process?
Look, there's been lots of people and books that have influenced me.
Uh-huh.
I think the work of Bill Mollison with permaculture would have to be one of the most important concepts that has influenced me. But there's been a whole range of people who've written about the environment and the impact that mankind has had. But if you're looking for number one, it would have to be Bill Mollison.
Yeah, perfect. So what one final piece of advice do you have for our listeners?
I think I would have to say that we should be understanding man's role in the position of the world. We live on a very delicate. I'm not anti-globalization, but I think one of the dangers that's happening in the moment, and you can see it in politics with Trump and Brexit, and even here in Australia, that people are becoming very dissatisfied with some of the outcomes of globalization. And I think that somehow or other mankind has to manage this globalization process so it provides benefits for all people, not just a few people, and it doesn't allow to go along in its headlong rush just to make profits, and in doing so destroy the world on which we live. Yeah. Well, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm sitting here shaking my head agreeing, and I don't know the answer to it either. Let's hope. I'm 56 and you're 77. Let's hope one of the youngins that are listening out there are doing something about that, huh?
Look, one of the things I hope that comes through from from this interview, that maybe somebody out there says, wow, I want to get involved with this guy, and they can email me. I'm quite a chatty sort of person. I get hundreds of emails a day, and I usually try and answer most of them. So if there's people out there who want to pick up the baton but run with me for a bit, I'd be more than happy. That would make this interview very successful.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show and sharing your experience with us today, Colin. It has been a treat getting to chat with you.
Yeah. Okay. Good on you.
So how can our listeners get a hold of you?
Well, I have a website.
Okay.
www. Now, it's Water Right. That's all one word, but it's got a double R in the middle, so it's waterright.com.au. Now, if you're doing your Google, you need to put the .au on the end, because I think it's the University of Tulsa have waterright.com. So you need to get waterright.com.au. And that's my email, Colin Austin, dead simple, at bigpond.com.
Very good.
If you go onto my website, I have a contact me, and there's my email on there. In fact, if you Google Wicking Beds, you'll probably find the Water Right website there anyway. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, you can find show notes from today's podcast at urbanfarm.org/Colin Austin. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us on the Urban Farm Podcast. Did you know the best seeds for your garden don't come from the nursery? In fact, the seeds that will create the most robust and delicious fruits and vegetables come directly from your garden. This is because they are uniquely adapted to your growing conditions, better than anything you can buy from a fancy catalog or website. Through the magic of seed saving, it is quite possible to have the garden of your dreams. The best part is, saving your own seeds is surprisingly easy and fun. With a bit of instruction, anyone can become a seed-saving superstar. Let us teach you how in our free seed-saving webinar. Just text SEEDS to 33444 to sign up, or visit seedsavinghacked.org for more information. That's SEEDS to 33444. or visit seedsavinghacked.org.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen 3 days a week for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org, or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.